A World Health Organization team has emerged from quarantine in Wuhan in China and will continue their mission to find the origins of COVID-19. They've left the hotel where they were speaking to their Chinese counterparts via video link for the past 2 weeks. Their exact schedule and where they're going is unknown, but the visit comes after months of negotiation between the WHO and Beijing. The BBC's Stephen McDonald is in Wuhan.
So basically we've been following this international team of scientists around today. We saw as they left their quarantine hotel to go to a normal hotel, a big rambling complex of a place where they'll be able to have face-to-face meetings with their Chinese counterparts. Now they've been having discussions via video link, but now they can sit down and talk to one another about the possible causes of the coronavirus. I think one thing that's pretty crucial is there's been a bit of misunderstanding, I think, as to what this team is going to do. They're not really going to be doing their own research. They're going to be examining what the Chinese scientists already have and then looking at what's missing. I mean, how do we get to the bottom of what caused this virus? Does new research have to be commissioned or something along those lines? They'll be then putting together a report and moving on from there. What they won't be doing is in 2 weeks telling us we've found out the cause of the coronavirus. They've stressed to us how complicated this is. It's a very difficult thing to work out. It's going to take time, maybe even years, and frankly asked us all just to wait and see what they come up with.
The scientists won't be visiting the lab, which some people say the virus may have originally escaped from. Here's Stephen McDonald again on why that is.
They see the lab leak theory as a conspiracy theory, really, and unless they've got some solid reason, they say scientific reason, they won't have me going down that path. What they're looking at is the zoonotic origin of the virus. In other words, the question of which animal it possibly came from, maybe a bat, say, into another animal and then finally into human beings, and how that could have taken place. I mean, they're even saying it could have come from a bat overseas or even a person in another country and that the virus entered Wuhan via somewhere else. That's a very contentious thing for them to have said because the Chinese government has been really pushing this line that, it probably came from overseas. I mean, one foreign ministry official even said it definitely came from overseas. So they'll be liking that the WHO is considering this. But either way, the scientists, whether they be from other countries or China, have somehow got to get above the politics in this and really mine into the research, into the data to see what they can find.
That was the BBC's Stephen McDonald. The Supreme Court in Pakistan has ordered the release of 4 men accused of being involved in the killing of an American journalist, Daniel Pearl, in 2002. Mr. Pearl was the bureau chief of the Wall Street Journal when he was abducted in the city of Karachi and later killed while researching a story on Islamist militants. The court dismissed all appeals against the acquittal of the main suspect, Ahmed Omar Sheikh, and 3 others by a lower court, which also overturned Mr. Sheikh's death sentence, triggering an international outcry. The lower court last year reduced his conviction from murder to a lesser charge of kidnapping. CNN's Ivan Watson covered the story when it happened.
This is a shocking development, and the murder of Daniel Pearl, it was one of the really disturbing periods at the beginning of the U.S.-led war on terror. Just months after the September 11 attacks, Daniel Pearl disappeared. He was in Pakistan, a Wall Street Journal bureau chief, and he had been meeting a contact while investigating Islamist militant groups. And in broad daylight, he got into a car at a Chinese restaurant in downtown Karachi and was taken away, lured away, and wasn't seen until later on this terrible video that emerged where his kidnappers beheaded him. And subsequently, that of course led to subsequent grisly killings carried out, copycat killings by Al-Qaeda and other copycat groups like ISIS. Now, I covered the trial of the suspects here, 4 men. Their leader was a British-born man named Ahmed Omar Saeed Sheikh. He was a real piece of work who had served time in India for allegedly kidnapping 4 tourists there, only released in a prisoner swap after terrorists hijacked an Indian plane to Afghanistan, and then he was arrested over the Daniel Pearl kidnapping and murder. He was completely unrepentant when he was sentenced to death in 2002 and talked about a war between Muslims and non-Muslims. The Supreme Court, 18 years later, overruling that conviction. The Pakistani government doesn't want this. It's keeping the suspects on a no-fly, no-exit list. Meanwhile, here's a statement from an attorney for the Pearl family, quote, "Today's decision is a complete travesty of justice, and the release of these killers puts in danger journalists everywhere and the people of Pakistan. We urge the U.S. government to take all necessary actions under the law to correct this injustice."
CNN's Ivan Watson. A previously unknown piece of music by Mozart has premiered online on what would have been the composer's 265th birthday. The performance of the piece is part of the Mozart Week festival in the Austrian city of Salzburg, which is taking place digitally this year because of the pandemic. The BBC's Bethany Bell reports from Vienna.
The Allegro in D major for piano is just over a minute and a half long, but it's complete.
What a joy to share with all of you this extraordinary moment. 94 seconds of new Mozart.
Rolando Villazon is the artistic director of the Mozart Week festival in Salzburg, where the work has just been premiered online. It's a dance piece that Mozart probably wrote in 1773 when he was 17 years old, at the end of his third trip to Italy. The manuscript, in the composer's own handwriting, was acquired by the Mozarteum Foundation from a private owner. Ulrich Leisinger, the director of research at the Mozarteum, says the score appears to have been part of a letter to Mozart's sister, Nannerl.
We carefully studied paper and handwriting, and the piece of paper has a fold, and so I assume that it was an enclosure for a letter that Mozart sent to Salzburg. The addressee would have been Mozart's sister, who from time to time got nice little things from Wolfgang, and she was definitely the first who would have played this piece way back in 1773.
Now it's being performed by the South Korean pianist Song Jin-cho.
I'm very honored to play Mozart's Allegro in D major, which is newly rediscovered here in Salzburg, where's the city of Mozart. What I like the most about his music is his storytelling, and I can also feel some operatic moments even in his piano repertoire. I always enjoy playing the Mozart since when I was a child.
Ulrich Leisinger says he hopes the short work can perhaps become a favourite encore piece.
We hope that many people will get access to it, and we do our best. We provide the music online in various formats. You can see the original manuscript, and if you really want to hold it in your hands, you cannot get the manuscript. We don't give it away, but you can get a facsimile edition, which we have just published.
That report from Bethany Bell in Vienna. And that's World Watch for today. Kia koe mani.
Kia ora Paulina. And koina te purongo o te paututanga mo tēnei rā te rāruat kauma iwa o kohitātia. That is Midday Report for Friday, January the 29th. And stay with us for the latest update from the Covid-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, and Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield. Big mihi to our producers, Siobhan Wilson, Denise Garland, and operator Sam Smale. Have a beautiful weekend, whānau. Kia haumaru te noho, kia pai tō koutou rā.
RNZ News at 1. Talawhalawa, I'm Marama Tipole. The COVID Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, and the Director General of Health, Ashley Bloomfield, will brief reporters shortly on the latest COVID cases in Northland and North Auckland. We'll cross to the Beehive when that happens. Event organisers are waiting for news from today's briefing as the threat of any more COVID-19 cases in the community looms over anniversary weekend plans. They're hoping the government's update will bring good news. At the Kumil Showgrounds, the first of an expected 2,500 Auckland Folk Festival guests began pouring through the gates at 9 o'clock. The event director, Nigel Robertson, says he's keen to listen to today's update so that he can finalise his plans. German health authorities say the AstraZeneca coronavirus vaccine should be given to only people aged under 65. The Independent Vaccine Commission advising the German government says there's insufficient data to assess its effectiveness in older age groups. Meanwhile, the European Medicines Agency is to decide by the end of the week whether to approve the vaccine for use across the European Union. A foreign policy professor has chided New Zealand's Trade Minister for a diplomatic faux pas in which he offered advice to Australia. In a media interview this week, Damien O'Connor suggested Australia follow New Zealand's lead and show respect when speaking about China. Mr O'Connor has since phoned his Australian counterpart to perform damage control. Robert Asen, who's a professor of strategic studies at Victoria University, says the remarks help build the narrative that New Zealand puts China's trade relationship ahead of human rights issues. Consumer confidence inched higher in January, with households more optimistic about the future. The monthly ANZ Roy Morgan Consumer Confidence Index rose 2 points this month to 114, which is still below normal. The proportion of people who thought they would be better off this time next year also rose, up by 3 points to 28. ANZ's chief economist, Sharon Zollner, says a strong housing market and the reallocation of international holiday spending has contributed to positivity among households. New tourism research shows domestic tourists are put off by activities that are too expensive or feel too touristy. The Tourism NZ research examines what New Zealanders want from domestic holidays to help the industry adjust while borders remain closed. Tourism Minister Stuart Nash says the research also found domestic travellers are looking much closer at their own backyard and at regions they may have taken for granted in the past. Mr Nash says the research shows many saw the challenges facing tourism, including regions struggling with visitor numbers before Covid-19. A major blaze in Northland has been contained but isn't fully under control. The fire in Matawaya, south of Kaikohe, has been burning for more than 12 hours and has destroyed around 120 hectares of forest. Fire and Emergency Senior Manager John Booth says the forest fire is being fought from the air and ground with helicopters, heavy excavators and over 40 firefighters on the scene. He says helicopters are being used to prevent the fire spreading to houses which are around 1 kilometre away. Mr Booth says wind conditions are hampering efforts, with the blaze expected to continue burning for up to 3 days. Designers from Massey University have tailor-made a moisture-wicking hijab for Muslim police officers. A design 18 months in the making led to a hijab made from sports fabric that allows officers to move, sweat and access their radios. Designers Deb Cumming and Nina Weaver consulted with Muslim women through every stage of the design process. It's attracted international interest, with a trial now underway in the Leicestershire Police Force in the UK. New Zealand Police spokesperson Leonie Smiley says the hijab can be worn with all regulation headwear in an effort to allow Muslim women to consider policing as a career. Toyota has reclaimed the top spot as the world's best-selling automaker, knocking Volkswagen off the number one spot. Last year, the Japanese company sold 9.5 million vehicles compared to Volkswagen's 9.3 million units. Big car makers have tussled over the crown for years. Toyota surpassed General Motors in 2013, and 2 years after that, Volkswagen unseated Toyota. That's the news.
They say that spring means just one thing, two little lovebirds.
Standing Room Only returns this Sunday with a story behind a new homegrown play called Tropical Lovebirds. We take a deep dive into still life painting, talk to the Kiwi behind many of Australia's top films and TV series, Greer Simpkin, and there's a panel discussion on the best crime writing on offer around the world. Let's misbehave. Standing Room Only with Lynn Freeman from midday Sunday on RNZ National.
RNZ National funded through New Zealand On Air. Jesse Mulligan is next, and time now for our short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northland to Waitonga, including Coromandel and Bay of Plenty. Cloudy periods, a few showers spreading north tonight, possibly heavy in eastern Northland tomorrow morning. Taranaki to Kapiti Coast, including the central high country. Cloudy periods with isolated showers today. Fine tomorrow, apart from a few morning showers in southern Taranaki. Gisborne to Wairarapa and Wellington, cloudy periods with a few showers becoming confined to Gisborne tomorrow and fine elsewhere. Nelson, Buller and Marlborough fine apart from isolated showers in the afternoons and evenings about the ranges. Westland, Canterbury, North Otago and Central Otago fine, apart from isolated showers about the ranges, clearing for tomorrow morning. Dunedin, Clutha, Southland, showers easing tonight and clearing to fine tomorrow. For Fiordland, fine apart from showers about the south coast, clearing tomorrow morning. And for the Chatham Islands, occasional showers, clearing to fine tomorrow afternoon. RNZ National at 6 minutes past 1, more news and weather at 2.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your patience. We're going to provide a further update around the Northland January source case today and the other steps that we're taking. I'm very happy to report there are no new community cases in the community around COVID-19 to report to today. A further 6,001 community transmission related to these recent cases. Many people, of course, are looking forward to the long weekend in Auckland. And of course, Waitangi Day is not far off as well. Those things have been front of mind for us as we've been working through these recent situations. The level of community testing that we have seen, with no new positive results in the community so far, does provide reassurance at this point that people thinking about whether or not they should be travelling in or around Auckland and Northland over the upcoming long weekends can do so. Our advice today, which Dr. Bloomfield will expand on, is that there's no reason why people's travel plans should change, given that everybody should already be following the essential Level 1 public health advice. I'll run through the key pieces of advice once again. Please keep washing your hands, follow cough and sneeze etiquette, and of course, stay home and do not travel if you are unwell. Contact Healthline and seek a test if you are showing COVID-19 symptoms. Please turn on Bluetooth and scan QR codes as you go. I want to update you on the Pullman Hotel. As I mentioned yesterday, ESR staff were on their way yesterday to do environmental testing to assist the investigation into how the infection was transferred between guests at the hotel. They've been on site all day today, and we're expecting to get the preliminary results from those investigations either later this evening or tomorrow morning. We absolutely need to know exactly what might have been happening at the Pullman and what needs to change as a result. What we know a little bit more about those two cases in a moment. We've made a number of changes over the past month to our managed isolation procedures and to our procedures around incoming arrivals. In January, we introduced pre-departure testing for long-haul travellers. Day 0 testing is now in place, and returnees are required now to stay in their rooms until they get a negative COVID-19 test result. And from tomorrow, all returnees will need to stay in their rooms after their Day 12 test prior to their departure. That's an interim step while we continue to investigate what has been happening at the Pullman. I'll now head over to Dr. Bloomfield for a case update and some further advice around travel over the long weekends.
Thank you, Minister. Kia ora koutou katoa. So first, regarding the Northland case, we first reported on Sunday. This person has recovered and the 11 close contacts have continued to return negative tests, and there are no further exposure events that have been identified at this stage. The close contacts who have coming to the end of their 14-day isolation period will start to be being released from today, and that will continue into next week. Since Sunday, nearly 2% of Northland's population has been tested, just under 4,000 tests, nearly half of those being done on a single day, the first day, January the 25th. The testing and processing of those samples required quick work from many people, and I want to thank the people of Northland who responded and were tested, as well as the staff up there who deployed rapidly and undertook all this testing, and the lab staff in Auckland, having scanned into at least one of the locations of interest, and we've updated the Ministry of Health website with further exposure events and locations of interest. There may be others as we continue the inquiries, and we will publicise those. Those locations include both the place and date and time. And if you were at these places, then the protocol is to isolate and call Healthline about getting a test. So far, 262 people linked to those locations of interest are isolating and have been tested, and I want to thank all of them. So yesterday our Auckland laboratories processed 2,940 community-based tests from the Auckland region, likely to exceed 4,000 once all are logged and processed. And I want to again thank Aucklanders for responding to the call, for being tested, and of course to the staff that have been doing that work. The two pop-up centres at Orewa and Albany remain open today, along with the existing community testing centres and testing availability through primary care and urgent clinics. There will still be testing open over the weekend, and the regional public health website will detail where that is available. Now on to the Pullman Hotel. Of the 353 guests who left this facility between the 9th and 24th of January, we have negative results for 314 people. That is confirmed negative results. And then we have the 2 cases as well that are the 2 positives. I should say that that number of 353 does not include the 12 people who travelled on to Australia quite soon after their departure from that. To date, we have no evidence of community transmission either in Northland or in the Auckland region. Previously, we have had community transmission, but we have not had to restrict movement or shut down or prevent any events going forward. So currently there are no recommended restrictions on events or on travel. However, of course, we can enjoy these sort of freedoms safely if we continue to all do our part. We know the disease is contained in New Zealand, even with these recent cases, but it is uncontrolled abroad. So alert level 1 is not alert level none. All the same basic health measures apply, and you know what these are, but the very most important thing is, please, if you are unwell, do not go out and do not travel this weekend. Please change your travel plans. A special request to people who are travelling around or outside of Auckland or Northland this weekend, or indeed anywhere in the country, please do scan. And if you haven't already, please turn Bluetooth on the app. A special effort this weekend will really help in case we need that information to track people's movements. I do want to thank event organisers in advance for precautions I know they will be putting in place to help keep people safe there. And just on case numbers, there are 6 new border cases of Covid-19 to report. All have been transferred to a quarantine facility in Auckland. 3 additional cases have recovered, and 1 previously reported case is now under investigation. So we have 72 active cases, and our total number is 1,949. Now, just an update on the 2 cases that the Minister mentioned at the Pullman. I've mentioned on the 24th of January, who arrived in the country on the 13th of January, and a second person who tested positive on the 26th of January, having arrived on the 16th of January, both at the Pullman Hotel. ESR advised us that the whole genome sequence showed a link between those 2 cases. The 2 cases were on the same floor, the 2nd floor in the Pullman, and so what our teams have done, Health and MB, who of course have the lead in running managed isolation facilities, Ministry of Health, as I said, as well as our Auckland Regional Public Health colleagues met this morning to have a good look at what they think may be the cause of that transmission, both of these 2 cases and our earlier 3, and what additional measures may need to be put in place. I just got that information before I came down the road for this media stand-up, and the recommendations from that group that meant are as follows. First of all, reinforcing the measures already in place, that no new arrivals are going into the Pullman, as the Minister mentioned, a significant restriction on movements outside of rooms for everybody, and no movement outside of rooms once people have had that final test at day 12. Additional interim measures that they have advised are that people who are due to depart should depart, but those people, when they go home, will be isolating at home and have a further follow-up test at day 5 as an interim measure, and we will be checking in on them daily to check on their welfare and their health.
John Hopkins today recorded more than 100 million cases of COVID-19 since the pandemic began and 2.1 million deaths. Back home here in New Zealand, we're working hard as members of the team of 5 million, and that hard work has put us in a very strong position, and we're doing everything we can to play our part to keep that. But we must remember that the risk of COVID-19 internationally continues to increase at the moment, and we are likely to see more pressure on our border. That's why we've been taking additional steps like pre-departure testing, like day 0 testing for those arriving in the country. We'll continue to look for how we can strengthen our system and, of course, prepare for the rollout of the vaccine. Jenna.
Sisters who came in from South Africa reported being bundled onto a bus with people from other different high-risk countries. Why is that happening?
Look, we look very closely at the transport arrangements, and it's something that I'm having another look at just to fully understand what's happening there. People shouldn't be put in a position where they are mingling with other flights when they're being transported from the airport to the hotel. That doesn't mean they wouldn't necessarily be on the same transport, but it means they should be separated. There should be distancing between them. So we're looking closally at that at the moment, just to make sure that there hasn't been anything happening there that shouldn't be.
Can you not just put on more buses?
Absolutely, where we need to, we will put on more buses. So I'm looking again very closely to make sure that the rules as we have set them out are actually being followed.
Family believes one of the sisters contracted COVID at the Pullman. They saw people playing basketball, mingling in hallways, failing to social distance. What assurances have you sought and received about those reports?
Look, like I said, I haven't seen those reports. We haven't seen
the team to go back and just have another look at that, just to confirm that.
The concerns that they're raising, though, if people are playing basketball in MIQ, does that concern you?
I think the minister's already responded to that.
I mean, can I just say here, people are allowed to exercise by themselves or within their bubbles, right? So if they're in a room with other family members, they go out to get their exercise. If there's a basketball hoop there and they're shooting hoops while they're exercising, and the only people that they're interacting with in that time are the people who they're in the same room with, I would say that fresh air and exercise is probably quite good for them. But if they're playing with other people from within the facilities, then yes, I would be very concerned about that.
Just on the 39 people, I mean, yesterday it was 52. How many of those can you say with some air of certainty that have already had a test out of the 39?
I'll ask Dr. Bloomfield.
So that's what I've asked the team to confirm. I checked just 5 minutes before coming down. It's still work in progress, but what I can say is that they have got the public health unit teams out from this morning, going out to find these people if they are not getting contact from them, or if we haven't seen the lab result come back.
Could you explain the lag there? Because that's a pretty significant piece of this puzzle. There are still 39 people that we don't know the status of. Why is it taking so long to get, I mean, are you having trouble getting into contact with them? What's the issue?
So the good thing is all 353 people contact was made with, and all were asked to isolate and be tested. The vast majority of those we can confirm have had a result, and all but 2 have returned a negative test. The extra effort is going in on this last group. Again, they have all been contacted, and on recontacted, most of them have said, those who have been recontacted have said, I've had a test or I'm about to have it of the country.
Yeah.
Were you informed of a hotel staffer having a 20-minute encounter with a returnee on January 7, and what's your reaction to that?
Yes, I was informed not long after that. I think it was over that summer period. I think it might have been the next day I found out about that. I did ask that they do a thorough investigation about into that, what had happened, and whether there was any further action that needed to be taken. I understand that person is no longer working for managed isolation.
It's a sort of a worst case scenario, isn't it? That it's such an encounter.
It's unacceptable behaviour, absolutely.
What did you find out about what happened?
What was that?
What did you find out about what happened?
I understand that the person delivered something to the room, was in the room for a period of time, that there may have been some communication between the guest and that person leading up to that, and obviously I asked for that to be fully investigated and for appropriate action to be taken. I understand that appropriate action has now been taken, and that person's no longer working for managed isolation.
Confident an incident like that won't happen again?
Look, at the end of the day, we ask we're dealing with human beings. We ask everybody to adhere to the standards that we put in place. I cannot control the actions of every individual, but we absolutely make clear what the rules are, and where people breach the rules, there are consequences.
How are they communicating? How are they communicating?
I understand passing notes. I think one was written on the back of a face mask.
Just to be clear, it was a sexual encounter between the two?
Look, regardless of, I didn't inquire into specifically the nature of the encounter, but there was a 20-minute encounter. That was enough for me to know that that was unacceptable.
Was there physical contact?
Look, I didn't ask for an explanation of exactly what the interaction had. The time that I have been the Minister overseeing managed isolation, it's the first one that's come to my attention.
Dr. Bloomfield, are you...
In Australia and Melbourne, that was blamed for creating the outbreak there, so does that concern you here?
Yes, it is a concern. Like I said, at this point, as far as I know, it is a one-off isolated event. I'm not aware of any other interaction, certainly in the time that I have been the Minister overseeing the facilities.
Bloomfield, are you aware of the specifics of this encounter?
No, I didn't know about it. Actually, I've just found out about it today.
Why didn't you tell us about it, Minister, when you found out?
Because there was an investigation. You know, when you're dealing with employment matters, you have to follow a natural justice process there. There was an investigation. That investigation's now concluded and the outcome is public.
Conclude?
I'm not sure.
They took to the room?
What was that?
What was it? You said they took an item, I think, to the room.
I believe it was a bottle of wine.
What were the notes they were exchanging? Do you know that?
I'm not familiar. I have not asked to see the details of all of those notes. The fact that the person was in the room for 20 minutes was enough for me to know that that was inappropriate and that they shouldn't have been. I'm not going to ask for a minute-by-minute account of exactly what happened during those 20 minutes.
Doing urgently to...
prior to the person being managed?
I don't know that detail either. Regardless of whether they knew each other, that person should not have been in their room.
What are you doing to urgently address the slipping standards at our MIQ facilities?
Look, I don't think that there are slipping standards. I think that is an isolated one-off event, and I do want to reiterate here that there are thousands of people working across these facilities who work with their finger on. That's exactly why we've been stopping new arrivals at the Pullman. We will see probably by the end of next week, around about next Sunday, that's when all of the guests who are currently there are scheduled to depart. We will not put more people in there until we've figured out exactly where the weaknesses are and made sure that we've addressed those.
In which facility did this particular incident occur?
I was told at the time, but I can't recall off the top of my head which one it was. I'm happy to get that information for you.
MIQ spaces are so limited and just for returning Kiwis, Dr. Bloomfield. How did 12 people in one hotel then manage to slip out of New Zealand?
Oh, look, that's not my area, but clearly there were some people who travelled to New Zealand with the intention of then travelling on to Australia, and they did.
Can I be clear here? New Zealand citizens are entitled to return home to New Zealand. Once they've completed their managed isolation, they are free human beings, free New Zealanders, the same as any others. If they then depart the country and move on, then ultimately that's a decision for them.
It's been reported that a couple of them travelled into New Zealand, onto Australia, onto Korea. That seems kind of weird, doesn't it?
Look, New Zealanders are free to leave the country. We are not stopping New Zealanders from leaving the country. That applies equally to someone who's just arrived as and finished their managed isolation as it does to someone who's been here right the way along. So I'll let you finish that question, then I will come over here.
Are people using New Zealand as a corridor?
It's possible. I think the number of people doing that would be very limited. I've not seen any evidence that that's a widespread practice, but it's certainly possible.
There are calls for the government to support a people's vaccine and waive rules on
Constraint here. It's manufacturing capability and capacity, and that's being stepped up by all these companies at great speed. The second thing is the issue here, of course, that we're concerned about, and I think the people you're talking about are concerned about, is ensuring access to vaccine fairly for people in low-income countries. And global initiatives like the COVAX initiative, which New Zealand is a part of and a contributor to, are designed specifically to help ensure that.
And Dr. Bloomfield, what's the number of people thought to have been infected with COVID in MIQ?
I've asked for that data because, as I say, we've been routinely looking to check that. It's a small number, less than 10 would be what I would estimate, but we will come back with a firm figure of what that number is.
When can we expect that?
I'll aim to have it in the next few days.
Can I note here that we have encountered a few issues before that have been well publicised, including we had some issues with our Russian mariners, the first cohort of those, and there was a thorough investigation as to how there was transmission within that facility at that time. Changes were made in the second cohort of Russian mariners that came through. We didn't see any issues with that. So we are always, whenever something happens, we always look at how it happened, why it happened, and how we stop it from happening again.
Just back to the 12 people who have flown out to Australia from the Pullman, what assistance are you giving the Australian authorities, and do you know how they were able to identify those people so quickly?
I'll ask Dr. Bloomfield. I know he's been involved in those discussions.
Yes, thank you. Actually, the Australians sent
positive test results, given we have had people out in the community with COVID.
I mean, I think the three community cases, the cases that have made it out into the community, the evidence is that they've been pretty diligent in the way that they have been behaving, and I really thank them again publicly. I've done that repeatedly. I thank them for that. You know, they've been doing the good things around contact tracing. They have largely kept it to themselves, which is pretty encouraging. I think you know, if we all consider our movements on a week-to-week basis. Certainly the second group, you know, the father and daughter have been relatively small number of movements, and that's been very helpful.
What's going to be done to police people who are going to be self-isolating once they leave the Pullman?
Mm-hmm. So we will do daily check-ins, phone check-ins, which is what we do, for example, when we have cases in the community and we ask close contacts to self-isolate. We ask them to isolate at home, and there is daily check-in. Remember, these are people who have come out of the Pullman. They have a very high level of awareness of the issues. They are very keen to protect their health, the health of their families and the wider community. So I'm expecting a high degree of support from them.
Is this a sort of a sign that we might look to do this for all MIQ returnees at extra time at home?
So this is an interim measure, and one of the areas we're giving further advice to the Minister on, amongst a whole range of options, is what further things, including additional periods at home and or even testing, might be put in place routinely, and so that'll be one of the areas we're advising on.
Yeah.
Should there be restrictions, or are you looking at restrictions preventing people from flying overseas right after they finish MIQ to prevent something like this happening again?
On that, my colleague Minister Chris Farfoy will be issuing a statement on that, and will be available to answer questions on that one.
Can I ask, sounds like officials have hustled and got the Wiggles into the country.
Yes, the Wiggles have been accommodated. There has been a little bit of wiggle room for the Wiggles, and their concerts will be going ahead.
Yeah, but will that mean some Kiwis can't get back into managed isolation? Will they take up their places?
No, I think that they managed to accommodate them just through, you know, sometimes there are cancellations and rooms become available and so on. I think they have managed to find a way to accommodate them.
How many people are we talking exactly here? Is it the Wiggles and their families? And like
now, I think from memory it's about 18 people, so it's not a huge number, and they're all people who are associated with the concerts.
There's no way that, was there any way that these 18 slots could have gone to Kiwis who are, you know, desperate to get home right now?
In some cases, no, because you know they're the result of cancellations. We might not have necessarily been able to reissue the vouchers. You know, so New Zealanders are not being pushed out of the queue in order to accommodate the Wiggles.
Dr. Bloomfield, what was your reaction on hearing about the inappropriate incident in the hotel bedroom?
Well, to be honest, I didn't have time to have a reaction because I found out about it on the way down to the stand-up. So, but I just reiterate the comment of the Minister made. The most important comment he made was thousands of incredibly dedicated, incredibly good staff work in these facilities day in, day out diligently to protect all of us. And
just to clarify, how long are people going to isolate for at home after they've left hotel?
So they will isolate at home. They will have a test on day 5 post-departure, and then they will they will isolate at home until they've had the result of that test.
And how often will staff now be getting tests?
My recollection is the advice was to move up to twice weekly testing of people working in the Pullman at the moment.
We have a last couple of questions over here.
The MIQ worker that was involved in this incident, do they work at the hotel that's being used as a managed isolation facility, or are they one of the army people who's being brought in to help?
No, my understanding is that they're employed by the hotel.
Just ask for some clarification around the exercising rules, because we've been hearing at some hotels there's a rule that you can only exercise at the same time as people on the same flight as you, but that's not happening at other hotels. So what is the
It will depend on the physical environment in the hotel, how much space there is. If it's a limited amount of space, then yep, they sort of timetable that space so that people can't interact with one another. If it's a larger space where people can maintain distance from one another, it's possible that there'll be more than one bubble of people exercising at the same time. So it really varies because the hotels are quite different. Some of them are inner city hotels where there's not a lot of outdoor space. In other cases, such as some of the ones out by the airport, have very large car parks, for example, where people can get out and exercise.
Are you concerned that 12 people who were at the managed isolation at the Pullman, where there has been transmission of COVID-19, have gone on to travel overseas and possibly could have taken COVID-19 with them?
Look, as I said, that they're free. They're free citizens. They've done their time in manner.
A right to enforce travel restrictions on us because 12 people from the Pullman went over there.
Look, Australia at the moment is making, but we don't have a trans-Tasman bubble. Australia at the moment is making their own decisions. Those are unilateral decisions, as well as their decision to allow New Zealanders to enter without isolation in the first place. So those are really questions for them.
That's a pretty good decision given the circumstances, though, doesn't it?
Look, that's a matter for the Aussies.
Thank you. Germany will not approve the AstraZeneca vaccine for over 65s. Will New Zealand follow suit?
Look, AstraZeneca is early on in the process of its approval. My understanding as of a couple of hours ago is that they've not yet applied for approval in New Zealand. So they'll go through the full MedSafe process. MedSafe may take those kind of calls. Thank you very much, everyone.